So Jesse Bam Rodriguez has just become the unified super flyweight champion, defeating South Africa's phumalele Cafu. I thought both Bam and Cafu fought very good fights. Bam was a level ahead from start to finish, but Cafu was still in the fight. He was moving very well, and I thought Cafu looked especially good defensively, at least until round 10. So after a big win like that, it's once again time to go over the potential opponents of Jesse Bam Rodriguez around his weight classes and figure out the chances his opponents have to beating him. As it turns out, Bam's next opponent is already booked, and that is against current 115-pound WBA champion Fernando Puma Martinez. Puma Martinez, until recently, was actually the unified IBF and WBA champion at 115. But for not defending against his mandatory, he was stripped of his IBF title, and the champion is now Willibaldo Garcia. So if it wasn't for the IBF, this could have been an undisputed fight. In terms of Martinez as an opponent, Martinez is definitely the most vicious opponent in the division. A non-stop, high-volume, power-punching pressure fighter who's also very durable and has great conditioning. Martinez has two seriously good opponents on his record, Joinan Cajas and Kazuto Ioka. Ioka being the most notable win, he fought him twice. But to be honest, I disagree with the scoring of each fight. I thought the first fight was a draw, and I thought the second fight was an Ioka win, as Ioka dropped him in the second half. Now obviously there's no shame in almost losing to Ioka. He's a former pound-for-pound talent, and one of the best counter-punchers the lower divisions have ever seen. But both Cajas and Ioka were both nearing the end of their careers. Jesse Bam Rodriguez may not have even entered his prime yet. He's on exceptional form at the moment, and certainly better form than Kazuto Ioka was on. However, what gives him a decent chance versus Bam is that I don't think Bam has fought someone so intense. There are very few opponents in these lower divisions that fight the way that Martinez does. Rungvisai was more of a flat-footed counterpuncher. Quadras was a brawler but very different to Martinez frame-wise. There is a chance we'll see a situation where Bam is overwhelmed by the constant volume and the constant power punching that comes from Martinez. Because we've seen Bam given the opportunity to use his footwork and to reset. What if someone simply does not allow him to reset? However, the clear talent edge does go to Bam, and I think he's going to stop Martinez in the late rounds. We move on to our next opponent, unified 112-pound world champion Kenshiro Teraji, who's also going to go in the decent chance. If these two were to fight, it would be two top 10 pound-for-pound talents fighting each other. I've got Bam at number 5 and Teraji at number 8. Teraji has arguably the best jab in boxing. I think Teraji's been in the game for a lot longer than people seem to realise. He won his first world title at 108 pounds back in 2017 and would defend that title 8 times against guys like Pedro Guevara and Saul Juarez, before suffering the first and only loss of his career versus Masamishi Yabuki. He'd avenged that loss the following year by knockout, and since then, he's been on immaculate form, stopping championship calibre opponents like Hiroto Kiguchi, Anthony Olasquaga on short notice, Heki Butler, Carlos Canizales, and since then made the move up to 112 to win the vacant WBC title versus Christopher Rosales, then immediately unifying versus WBA champion Seigo Yuriakui. In terms of the names on their records, Teraji and Bam are not far off. The difference maker is in the fashion these two are winning their fights, and also the weight. Teraji has had some very close competitive fights recently, especially versus Canizales and Yuriakui. The last time Bam was in a fight that you can actually consider competitive was 2022 when he fought Israel Gonzalez. Bam and Teraji are two extremely talented boxers, but there's a clear difference in form and a difference in size between the two, and the edge does go to Bam in those situations. Moving on to our next opponents in the low chance tier, we have Chocolatito Gonzalez. As much as I'm a big fan of Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, he's got maybe 1 or 2 fights left in him, and then it's time to call it a day. He's had a stellar career fighting guys like Estrada 3 times, Quadras, Rungvisai, Rodriguez Jr., Julio Cesar Martinez demolishing Khalid Yafai, but you can definitely see in his most recent fight versus Roba Barrera, he's really slowed down now, and I don't think he'd be able to keep up with the speed, the technique, and the skill of Bam Rodriguez. Moving on, we have 112 WBO world champion Anthony Olasquaga. I've put Olasquaga in the low chance tier. To be honest, Olasquaga is a guy who's disappointed me in recent years. I expected really great things from him following the fight versus Kenshiro Teraji because he looked like a really promising, talented young fighter before the Kenshiro Teraji fight. He takes a fight on short notice versus Teraji. Obviously, he's not expected to beat a guy like Kenshiro Teraji on 2 weeks' notice when you're only 6 fights into your professional career and you're 24 years old. And to be honest, he performed reasonably well in the fight itself, but while he has progressed since then, what we've seen is consistently bad fight IQ. He's a really impressive athlete, so naturally he's got all the tools to beat a guy like Guillermo Magramo, and recently versus Hiroto Kiguchi. But those were 2 fights where I really thought he struggled a lot more than he should have done. He made a silly amount of mistakes fight IQ wise and shot selection wise versus Kiguchi, to the point where I don't think he can really do anything to Bam Rodriguez, which is what puts him in the low chance tier. Moving on, we have an interesting case, Francisco Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez is coming off a stellar upset win over Galal. I picked Rodriguez to win that fight, but not in the fashion that it turned out to be. Rodriguez has never thrown the ridiculous amount of punches he threw versus Galal. In fact, no one has thrown that many punches in flyweight history. And as it turned out, there's quite a simple explanation for that. Recently, from a post-fight test, an adverse finding was found by VADA, meaning he was on PEDs for the fight versus Yafai, just like everyone seems to do from the Reynoso gym. So in terms of his chances versus Bam, it will depend on if he's still on steroids or not. If he was on the same juice he was on versus Yafai, he's a dangerous fight the same way that Fernando Martinez is, quite similar stylistically. But if he's less explosive and less active, he'd be a tier lower. Taking us once again to the decent chance tier with 118-pound world champion Yoshiki Take. Take is one of the 2 elite Japanese kickboxers who's making their transition over to boxing, and we've seen Take progress extremely well in a very short amount of time. He was only 8 fights and 3 years into his pro career by the time he got his world title shot versus Jason Maloney, a fight that he dominated for the most part in the first 10 rounds, but did show signs of poor conditioning in the championship rounds. But there was an immediate sign of improvement in his very next fight versus Daigo Higa, as he made it to the championship rounds quite well, and then recently destroyed 15-0 Thai boxer Yuttapong Tongyi. What puts Yoshiki Take in the decent chance tier is not only is he physically bigger than Bam frame-wise, I think stylistically with the way he boxes off the back foot, he's a southpaw with an extremely dangerous left hand. There is a chance that Take can build off the success that Israel Gonzalez was having. However, Take does have a case of low hand syndrome. If he's not switched on the entire fight, he could easily get caught by Bam. And Daigo Higa was catching Take very, very clean in some moments. So you have to pick Bam, but it is a fight that's interesting stylistically. Moving back down to low chance, we have Galal Yafai. Similar to his brother Khaled Yafai, Galal Yafai was tipped by British promoters to become the new king of the flyweights. Khaled Yafai's hype train was stopped by Chocolatito Gonzalez, and Galal Yafai's hype train was stopped by Francisco Rodriguez Jr. recently. Obviously, you can't take too much away from Yafai for losing that fight because obviously Rodriguez was on PEDs. But the fight did highlight stylistic issues for Yafai that led to me picking Rodriguez in the first place, namely his lack of head movement and lack of ability to box on the back foot. Galal Yafai is a pressure boxer with limited power, so you need to have a backup plan when you fight someone who's stronger than you and more powerful than you on the inside. Yafai is simply not versatile enough to be elite. I think Bam Rodriguez would simply counter the hell out of him. Guys like Puma Martinez and Rodriguez Jr. are more dangerous because they have power in their hands. Yafai does not. So it would be an uphill battle for Yafai versus Bam Rodriguez. Sticking to the low chance tier, we're now going to talk about Kazuto Ioka. Even though I did think Ioka won the second fight versus Puma Martinez, stylistically Puma Martinez and Jesse Bam Rodriguez could not be further apart. Ioka is a counterpuncher by trade, and Bam is not someone who really puts himself in a position to be countered that much. Ioka's feet are very, very slow comparatively to Bam Rodriguez, so I think stylistically it's a bit of a mismatch in favour of Bam. Moving on to the fights that's on most people's minds when it comes to who can actually beat Jesse Bam Rodriguez, Junto Nakatani. Bam is the unified king at 115, Junto is the unified king at 118. I've got Bam at number 5 pound for pound and Junto at number 7. This is quite literally the definition of a 50-50 fight simply because I change my opinion on who I think wins every time I think about the fight. Sometimes I think Junto was simply too difficult to close the distance on with his reach, with his height, with his ridiculously powerful left hand. Other times I think Bam is multi-dimensional enough to find a way to find Junto's chin. I think coming up in weight as the smaller man to face Junto Nakatani is a massive, massive task. And while I do think Bam passes the eye test a bit better than Junto does, there's a certain point where he may simply be too small to beat Junto because he's quite a small 115er anyway. He can make 112 if he has to. But outside of that, I do think Bam is the overall better fighter. He's beating the better names, he seems a bit less vulnerable. Junto is a guy who we've not seen get hit clean that much, and when he does get hit clean, he doesn't react too well. So we could be building up Junto like he's some unbeatable monster, but he could simply just get chinned by someone. If I had to pick a winner at the moment, I would lean Bam, to be honest. I think Junto is used to fighting in straight lines. The best thing about Jesse Bam Rodriguez is that he closes the distance without being in a straight line. He uses those angles, he switch hits, he sidesteps. So I think he would find the button on Junto, but Junto is someone who's really, really dangerous and very difficult to close the distance on. Moving on back down to low chance tier, we have Daigo Higa. Daigo Higa is about to become WBA 118-pound world champion versus Antonio Vargas, a fight that's taking place this Wednesday. Daigo Higa is a guy who's really, really dangerous against a hittable opponent. Higa has absolute bricks in his hands, and I think he's the second best puncher at 118 behind Junto. But he can also be very sloppy, leaves himself open, and I don't think he's technically as good as a brawler compared to Martinez or Francisco Rodriguez, so he's got a low chance of beating Bam Rodriguez. Moving on back to decent chance, we have Ryosuke Nishida. Ryosuke Nishida is still one of my picks for the most underrated boxer in the world. He just lost his unification fight versus Junto Nakatani, but he fought quite a strange fight. He fought in an aggressive way versus Junto. Despite being a fighter who was at his best on the back foot, he got caught coming in too many times, his eyes started swelling up, and the doctor had to step in. But when Nishida's fighting as he's supposed to when he's on form, he's very much a player in the 118-pound division. I think he's number 2 firmly behind Junto himself. And he's simply a very technically sound, very fundamentally sound back foot boxer. One of my favourite things about him is his solid guard. He's surprisingly difficult to hit clean, and I think Bam could drop 2 or 3 rounds versus Nishida. Moving back down to low chance, we have Tenshin Nasukawa. Tenshin is very similar to Yoshiki Take, former kickboxer turned boxer, but I don't think he's quite translated the same way that Take has, and I think partially it is because of the power. He's definitely world level based on the Jason Maloney win. In terms of reflexes and natural fighting fundamentals, you can tell why he was as good as he was as a kickboxer, but he still does make a fair few amounts of mistakes, and I think in his last fight versus Victor Santillan, we really saw his lack of power. He was hitting Santillan with clean counterpunches on the chin, and Santillan was not going down. So that is a hurdle for Tenshin to overcome if he was to be matched up versus a serious puncher at 118, like Daigo Higa, Yoshiki Take, or Jesse Bam Rodriguez himself. Moving on, we have the 4th champion at 118, Seiya Tsutsumi. I think Tsutsumi should have won that fight versus Daigo Higa in the rematch, but I give them both a similar chance versus Bam Rodriguez. I think they're simply just not as strong as champions compared to Nishida and Nakatani. Tsutsumi is a great, well-rounded, dangerous boxer, but Jesse Rodriguez is simply a different talent, and it'd be very difficult to see him beating him. Moving on, we have 112-pound world champion Masamishi Yabuki. As good as Masamishi Yabuki still is, I've put him at low chance for stylistic reasons. The way I envision the fight playing out reminds me of Bam versus Rungvisai. I think Yabuki's feet are simply too slow compared to Bam, and I can see him struggling to keep up with Bam the same way he was versus Teraji in the second fight. And finally, our last pick on the list is going to be Naoya Inoue. Pound for pound number 1, number 2, number 3, wherever he is. And he's the only fighter I'd pick for certain to beat Jesse Rodriguez. I'm fully aware the fight's never going to happen because Inoue is 2 weight divisions above, but I think it's worth having him on there just to indicate how much is too much and where Bam's ceiling is. Inoue is too fast, too sharp, too big, too accurate, too skilled, and he would beat Jesse Rodriguez. And that's going to do it for the video. Who do you disagree with? Who do you agree with? How do you see the Martinez fight playing out? Like and subscribe. Leave a comment. Goodbye.